I'll keep this out of the
Okay.
recording for now.
Okay. Hi, Eric. Hi, Chris. And we're right there.
Hey guys, how are you doing today? I'd like to ask you a few questions. What have you eaten today? What was for breakfast? What was for breakfast yesterday? Now, the answer to these questions doesn't come easy. What did I have for breakfast yesterday? I don't remember. Now, food is a huge thing. We eat all the time, and there are all sorts of elements that are involved with food. Food's one of the staples of our lives, and we really need to pay attention to it. There's so much that rides on food, and it has a huge impact on our lives, lifestyles, and our future. According to medicine.net, poor diet and lack of physical activity is catching up to tobacco as one of the leading killers in the United States. Now, with these poor eating trends that we're developing, I'd like you to take some of this information on energy efficiency, health benefits and risks, and social implications of food, and take that and hopefully improve your lifestyle in just a few different ways. Firstly, I'd like to talk about energy efficiency in the food that we eat today. Currently, we have a very high meat diet, and I would not like you to take away from this that we should eat less meat or very little meat, but I'd like you to think about this because we rarely weigh the amount of energy we get from the food that we eat. I'd like to focus on the aspects that differentiate meats from non-meats when we eat them. Primarily, the issue is how much energy we get from what we eat and how much space it takes up on this world. The second law of thermodynamics shows that energy is lost to heat in transition periods. So, in actuality, instead of getting all the energy that's in some sort of food, you get 10% of that. That's a terribly small number, mostly when you go from starting at 100, if a cow eats grass, becomes 10% of that. When we eat that cow, that becomes 1% of what that grass originally contained in energy. And that's a terribly small number. So for example, 1,315 kilograms of corn in soybeans can support 22 people. However, if you convert this to ground beef, it will only support one person. That's 22 times a difference. And so, with this, I'd like to show you the trophic levels and how they affect us in a visual.
As you can see, there are arrows pointing to different sorts of organisms eating others. And each time you see that arrow go to something else, that shows a 10% energy loss. Now imagine that with humans in the food chain.
Humans are at the very top of the food chain. We eat, and we're generally tertiary feeders. We're the third level after. So, at most, if there's perfect energy consumption, we'll get about 10%. And it only goes downward from there. So, this sort of energy transition is terribly important when you deal with the population of humans growing to almost be 7 billion. Now, the more meat we eat, the more space we take up. We're already using all sorts of improved agriculture to improve the crop output. And in reality, we can't all eat as much meat as we do because there are people that are already starving in this world. And we have to change that. And I hope you take that in mind with energy efficiency. I'd like to continue on with health benefits and risks of food. This is overtalked, and I'll try to keep it short because it's kind of repetitive. It's a well-known fact that in recent years that the obesity rate has skyrocketed in the US. Its factors are two things: exercise, and more importantly, what we eat. According to the Center for Disease Control, about a third of adults and almost 20% of adolescents, so 1/5 of all the kids in the US, are obese right now. And unfortunately, there's very little some people can do about that. Fast food isn't the only aspect we see in society that causes this sort of unhealthiness. We have frozen meals, we have cheap sugary foods like cookies and all sorts of other things. So we have a lot of snacks and meals that are wholly high in sugar content and high in fat content and low in carbohydrates. Now plants create carbohydrates, and where you see that high in the trophic levels for energy, we're not eating that as much as we are the proteins and the fats and the sugars. Unfortunately, there's almost always a high sugar and fat content in these cheap foods. This doesn't come without a cost when you go with the cheap food. According to Livestrong.com, eating too much sugary, salty, fatty foods can cause you to have many different problems, including heart disease, diabetes, certain cancers, and hypertension. Hypertension is increased blood pressure and is terribly common as you age. To help kind of understand eating a balanced meal, I've had half of an apple today. That's not even close to how much I should have, but I'd also like to show you what you really should be eating every single meal and throughout the day.
You'll likely recognize this as the food pyramid we learned growing up in school and health class, and it shows you all sorts of different food groups. We of course have bread and grains, we have fruits, vegetables, milk, we have dairy products with that, we have meat and poultry, and we of course have fat, oils, and sweets. As you go higher on the food chain, you want to eat less of that throughout the day, which is of course cautioned to eat too much. And so, coming from the USDA, it's probably a good idea to keep that in mind when you're thinking about health risks and what you're eating throughout the day. Finally, there are tons of social repercussions that come with eating in all sorts of food-related issues. They're much less known, so I'll take a few of them and try to describe them carefully. The current economic issue of foods is that it's cheaper for many of the growers of produce to sell to other countries because the price is generally higher. Only 18 cents of every dollar when buying at a large supermarket goes to the grower, and 82 cents go to the middleman. And this is brought to you from Local Harvest, which is a organization that takes all sorts of information for agriculture. And so, of course, it's more beneficial if we go organic and buy directly from our farmers and they get a dollar for the dollar of what their food's worth, rather than we go to a large supermarket. A second implication of this is that we'll likely eat healthier if we go to the actual grower and get the fresh food right away. And sometimes you'll learn how to prepare something new or see something different. And so hopefully you take that and you might think about going organic, or you might think about taking it to your local grower. In addition to supporting our local farmers, we have the social issue of culture and the traditional idea of a dinner table. In psychology and sociology, this idea shows us that at the dinner table, a child or an adolescent learns all sorts of values and bonding at the dinner table, where you have a full meal and you have a family. Now, as meals become less common as a family, and meals become more common on the road with fast food or all sorts of events to take place, we have the issue of there being no dinner table. We have issues of not only high fat and high sugar foods, but we have an issue of the lack of culture being passed down. Now, to make it to some sports activities, yeah, it's required. But I still urge you to take the time, maybe twice a month, which is not very much. That's one every 15 days. And make a meal. Have a whole meal with your family or your roommates in college. It may be difficult for you to have access to a kitchen. You can find one. It will not only help you eat healthier, you may have leftovers, but it'll improve your relationships with your roommates. You'll have a bonding that really doesn't happen outside of the dinner table. In conclusion, our eating habits have turned around completely in the past half of a century. And I'm no different. I have these bad eating habits as well. But
I've told you how food is relevant, and I know how food is relevant. You knew before this. And how it affects our energy footprint is something new. How about the social implications of it? You know the health benefits and risks, so why don't you take that and try to improve on what you eat, where you eat, when you eat. As people, we should pay more attention to the food we eat and serve to others to create healthier people, create healthier relationships, and healthier lifestyles. I ask you to take a little time out of every day, try a new recipe, maybe make a traditional meal. It doesn't take much out of your time out to look for some good deals on food. It doesn't take much time to be healthier yourself. Thank you.